Okay, the Klan. There was a change in the leadership. A dentist from Texas took over from Simmons, the original leader, and something else I need to throw in, just kind of for curiosity. The original founder, where he said he got the idea. He claimed that one summer's day he was lying on his back in the grass, looking up at the sky and the clouds and how clouds would look like this or that kind of thing. And he said the clouds formed themselves into what appeared to be a procession of white hooded figures marching across the sky. He took that as a sign from God that his mission on this earth was to revive the Ku Klux Klan. Okay, there you go. All right, Klan began to grow pretty rapidly in the 1920s, and what the new marketing team did was to push the Klan as a specifically Christian organization. Okay, a specifically white Christian organization where people who just felt helpless against the onslaught of moral and cultural deterioration could unite and take up arms against this. So the Klan grows rapidly in the Old South and outside the Old South. The Klan was potent in Pennsylvania, California, Oklahoma, Kansas, etc., and practically owned the state of Indiana, which had originally been settled by Southerners before the Civil War. But in Indiana, something like upwards of half of all adult white males were members of the Klan. There's also a women's branch of the Klan. Okay, and I put up a supplement, not a supplement. I put up a video about the rise and fall of the 20s era Klan, and you'll notice it's somewhat biased. What do I mean by that? Well, the narrator is reading a script written by someone who just carries with them the assumption that to be a conservative is to be suspect, to be a racist, to be filled with hate. So you'll detect that. It won't be the last time you detect that in stuff you run into. Um, they had a mass meeting in Washington, D.C. in something like 1925, and there are photographs of just hooded Klansmen with their faces exposed, marching, 20 abreast down Pennsylvania Avenue with the U.S. Capitol in the background. So that's probably the high point. They claimed roughly 5 million militant members. Before I get on to their sudden fall, I want to point out that the people who joined the Klan don't really fit what we would consider to be the typical Klan profile. People at the time, before the Klan got the reputation that it has obtained since, they thought of it as just a kind of specifically Christian version of the Lions Club or the Rotary Club or the JCs or something like that. So these are really pretty ordinary people who hold on to conservative or traditional values and just really didn't take well to being the objects of the scorn and contempt of the fashionable. So this was just their way to do that. Now, there are people who deeply need these guys to have been frothing at the mouth racists filled with hate. I don't know that I buy that. Some of them might have been. I doubt seriously that all of them were. Okay, I don't think that's really what it was, because it wasn't just anti-black. I mean, it's anti-anything that kind of goes against the grain of what America is supposed to be about, for sure. But they don't appear to have been particularly violent, and it was not just Christian and white; it was Protestant. So, as I said, Catholics couldn't join, Jews couldn't join, immigrants couldn't join. And they were strongest in the Democratic Party. 1924, the Democratic Convention considered nominating Al Smith of New York, a Roman Catholic, and there were enough Klansmen there to prevent that. There was some Klan presence in the Republican Party, but not anywhere near as much. Okay, why did they fall so swiftly? Now remember, these are regular, ordinary people. These are not, generally speaking, a bunch of out of control race baiters. they're worried, they're afraid, and we get people scared. They'll do stuff. But the Grand Dragon of Indiana, and the video I posted did a reasonably good job of this. Very powerful man. He felt himself to be immune from the law because he had collected enough dirt, enough evidence on like the governor and most of the legislators, stuff like that, that if they didn't do what he said, he could bring them down. Well, he had a lot of people working for him in an office. And by the way, he seems to have been a good speaker, a likable man, that kind of thing. The times were different. There was a secretary working there named Madge Oberholzer, I think was her name, fairly attractive looking woman, and he took a shine to Madge Oberholzer, that is the Grand Dragon. And she was probably not the first or only one that he had been attracted to. Anyway, she was not receptive to his advances. You don't say no to the Grand Dragon. So he had his henchmen basically abduct her and hustle her onto a passenger train, rolling down the tracks in the night, where she was drugged and she was sexually abused by the Grand Dragon of a supposedly Christian organization. She managed to come to and basically jumped off the train in full motion. Cuts and bruises and scrapes, but a train's not going to stop and pick her up, no matter what the Grand Dragon says. She made her way to a farmhouse. They called the sheriff, and she dictated a full statement disclosing what had been done to her and who had done it. So the Grand Dragon was subsequently indicted and put on trial. He was indicted for second-degree murder because not too long after dictating her statement, Madge Oberholzer committed suicide. The trauma was that great. So, Grand Dragon, I don't know what his name was. He might want me to mention it. I'm not going to, even if I remember what it was. He goes on trial. He's not worried. He owns the state. You can't find 12 jurors. There were 6 of them aren't members of the Klan. And if they convict him, he can make bad things happen to him, but he was convicted. He's not worried. The governor, he's got the dirt on the governor. The governor will pay a price if he doesn't pardon him. The governor didn't pardon him, and he went to prison. And his black box of secrets came open and ruined the careers of a number of politicians, but he did his time. Now, popular image of the Klan, what would it take to shock a Klansman? You'd think quite a bit. Not as much then. Klan membership began to decline rapidly, partly because of the stunning shock of a highly responsible, I almost said respectable, I guess he was in his own circle, leader like the Grand Dragon of Indiana, where the Klan was strongest, and partly just, lurking around with a sheet over your head. Doesn't seem all that manly when you think about it. And you're rubbing elbows with some really slimy characters. Okay, a lot of the people there weren't slimy characters. They got fed up pretty soon of dealing with people who were. By the end of the decade, the Klan was back down to kind of where it started from at the beginning of the 20s. Didn't completely go away. It had a bit of resurgence after World War II when the move toward the civil rights movement was picking up steam. And that time, Superman got involved. The Superman cartoon character had been very popular since the late 1930s. During the war, they had Superman fighting the Nazis, the cartoon character. After the war, there are no more Nazis to fight. And by the way, Superman had a very popular radio program that mainly young boys listened to avidly. So why don't the Klans like the Nazis? We can have him fighting the Klan. So Superman goes to fighting the Klan. And yeah, there's some crossover between the Nazis and the Klan. And say you've joined the Klan and then you don't want your 11-year-old son to find out about that because of what he's hearing on the radio. So it hung around. It tried to obstruct the civil rights movement in the 60s, committed a small number of very, very messy crimes. You're almost surprised there weren't more than there were. And the time came when a federal judge ruled against them in a case and fined them. I mean, they had to disband. They had to disband to avoid the fine. 1970s, they had a leader named David Duke, and he didn't look like a Klansman. He was slick, blow-dried hair, wore nice suits, all that kind of thing. He's trying to friendly up, nicen up the Klan. He even set up Dial a Klansman. He'd go on talk shows and give the spiel. And one day he ran for governor of Louisiana. And his opponent, the Republicans nominated him, and the leading Republicans said, he's not one of ours. The Democrat opposing him was known to be basically a criminal, so what are you going to do? Crook versus Klansman. The crook won and eventually met with his reward as well. So is the Klan still with us? Just barely. My info is out of date. There are people who make it their business to kind of keep an eye on the Klan so we don't get surprised. And they say somewhere maybe around 1,000 or so actual real hardcore card-carrying Klansmen in the country. They're splintered into various mutually opposing groups. In addition, we have skinheads. We have the Posse Comitatus. I'm not sure, I don't know much about them. They take a name from something quite ancient. You have the Aryan Nation, which carries on Hitler's mistaken idea that Aryan was an ethnic designation when it's not at all. It's a linguistic and cultural designation, and Aryans inhabit the subcontinent of India. So Hitler was dead wrong. So are the people who weren't trying to emulate him. And you pass a point pretty quickly where you would get the idea from a lot of the media that conservatives are pretty much all secret Klansmen. They're racists, they're homophobes and hydrophobes and any kind of phobe you can think of, because part of what gives these people's lives meaning and purpose, I'm not talking about people with conservative views, is they need some black-hearted villain to point the bony finger at. So they project upon them vile things of which they are not guilty. Okay? So the Ku Klux Klan. Let's see what kind of time I got left. Not very much. I'll set up the next one. The next controversy has to do with the theory of evolution, as forwarded by an English clergyman named Charles Darwin in the mid-19th century. Darwin went on a round-the-world cruise in, I think, the 1830s, maybe 1840s. He observed plant and animal life in different parts of the world. The Galapagos Islands in the Eastern Pacific impressed him quite a bit. Back in England, he wrote a big book entitled The Origin of Species, where he took a doctrine that had been, or an idea, a theory that had been kicked around already, and popularized it. The theory of natural selection. That is that all the plant and animal species that we see around us, including we ourselves, did not originate in the form in which we exist now, that through a process he called evolution, that have changed gradually. If he proved anything, it was that he himself was a 19th century man who equated change with progress. We started out as pond slime. We end up being the glorious creatures we see when we look in the mirror. And they differentiated by adapting to changing circumstances. And those species more capable of adaptation will survive, and others will not, and it will end up being sort of an upward curve. Well, the last people to accept this were actually the scientific community. They said they didn't see any evidence in the fossil record. The philosophical community, such as it was, glommed onto it eagerly because they'd been embarrassed for quite a while about the awkward necessity of having to believe in God because there was no other explanation of how all of this got here. There still isn't. And so, yeah, that was a side door where they could debunk God without having to apologize to anyone. So this increasingly put, you know what, we'll take this up in the next one.